Let's look closer at the media coverage of the US presidential year. Daily Telegraph columnist and Sky News regular Miranda Devine is covering the contest for the New York Post and for the Daily Telegraph back here. She joined me earlier from New York and I asked her if things are as polarised in the middle of the media pack as much of the media coverage would suggest.
Thanks, Chris. Look, from the inside, I guess it's the same as it is in Australia. There's collegiality between different media organisations and Americans are extraordinarily polite. But in terms of what you're reading in the different media, the newspapers and watching on, the different cable channels, it couldn't be more polarised. It's gone back to the sort of Wild West days of Yonder when there was, just one type of media for the right and one type for the left, and never the twain shall meet. And so you have stories which, objectively, if you were reporting them straight, I guess you could see nuance. But the way they're reported in America now is that it's just black and white. It's either good guys or bad guys. If you're a Trump supporter, if you're in the Trump supporting media, whether it's the Washington Post or New York Times, MSNBC, CNN, you will view and report certain stories to put the worst possible spin on it for Donald Trump. And the opposite goes, of course, for the more Trump-supporting media.
And what about the mechanics of this massive primary focus, of course, we've seen in recent weeks in Iowa first and then New Hampshire, small states but massive media contingents and lots of candidates. Do you effectively take over the state's media for a week or so?
Well, yes, and I mean, for those small states, the big media pack that comes to town and the year or so that they get of each of the campaigns coming in and, putting down roots, that is an enormous boost to their economy. The media is there. It seems like it's out of proportion, but it actually isn't, because historically, whoever the candidate is that gets a jump from those early states often goes on to win the nomination. So while the delegate count might be small and those states might not be particularly representative of America as a whole, they have a disproportionate sort of effect on the outcome. And that, of course, at the moment is really alienating a lot of Democrats, especially the progressives. They don't like Iowa and they don't particularly like New Hampshire. They see them as white states and not progressive enough. Iowa went to Donald Trump by 10 points in 2016 and New Hampshire only didn't by a handful of votes, and looks like, at least from my reading of the situation there and interviewing a lot of people there, looks like it will head for Trump again in the next election. So the Democrats feel they're being a little hamstrung in those states.
Now, you've always seen this stuff in pretty prescient terms. You've been a realistic assessor of what's been going on in the States, both from when you were in Australia and since you've been there. But as you know, there's been this Trump derangement syndrome. It's been reflected in a lot of the media. Sure, there is media that's supportive of Trump, but there's masses of media that's been against Trump from the start. And journalists consumed by Trump derangement syndrome, the focus for so long on Russiagate. Then, of course, this Ukraine impeachment, which always seemed as if it was only going to help Trump. Do you think after what we've seen in Iowa and in New Hampshire, the penny is starting to drop for even those supportive or the anti-Trump media, if you like? They're starting to see that the Democrats might have trouble coming up with a candidate that can actually withstand the momentum that Donald Trump has created.
Yeah, look, there have been quite a few angst-ridden op-eds written about it, and people like James Carville, a former Clinton and Obama Democratic strategist representing the sort of establishment Democratic Party, is wailing about how the Democrats are putting themselves in a losing position for the next election because all they're doing is obsessing about Donald Trump and being pulled to the left by Bernie Sanders and his band of socialists. And look, they're right about that, because you've seen Donald Trump he's quite, contrary to what you would think, reading the Trump derangement media, he actually became more popular in those months during the impeachment trial and the impeachment proceedings beforehand. From October, he got the highest Gallup poll approval rating in his entire term. He's beating Obama at the same time. And I think what's happened, and certainly I got this impression from interviewing people voting on polling day in New Hampshire, many of whom just randomly turned out to be Trump voters, is that they are fed up. They see through what they view as a dishonest media portrayal of the president and these witch hunts that have been going on endlessly, the permanent impeachment, as the Democratic leadership calls it, and it strikes them as being not fair. And so it almost drives them into the arms of Donald Trump. And so I think some in the media are realising that actually they're part of the problem, that while they're reporting things as they wish they were and as the most vocal part of their readership, the ones who, write the comments and tweet about their articles, by trying to pander to them, they're actually losing sight of what the real story is, which is that out there in real life America, people are sick to death of the never-ending campaign resistance against Donald Trump. They just figure, look, the economy is doing well. We may not particularly like him, but he's not as bad as you say. You're demonising the guy. Leave him alone to do his job and let us make the decision in November.
Let's talk about your impact. There's an Aussie columnist in the New York Post. I know, of course, you spent time growing up in the US, but you're very much an Aussie. You've turned up there this year. You're writing truth bombs in your columns in the New York Post. It's been noticed everywhere, including in the White House. Your recent column looking at some of the facts of the impact of the impeachment process was picked up by Donald Trump himself. He said, "Thank you to Miranda Devine of the New York Post for your interesting and correct column today." And he quotes how this was the one where you pointed out that he'd gained 20 points since the impeachment began and that he's got gets 67% approval on the economy, so on and so forth. Nice one, Nancy, suggesting that Nancy Pelosi has brought this upon the Democrats. It must be incredibly flattering to get that sort of, I suppose, cut through and have your work being noticed in the White House. How does this impact your work there amongst your colleagues in the press pack and the like?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, he did actually misquote me because he didn't got. I didn't write that he went up 20 points. He only went up 10 points, which was funny. But look, I got lots of texts and
an alternative fact.
Congratulations, I guess, for that. Yeah, alternative facts, exactly. But yeah, it's funny, it's fun. The New York Post is supposedly the president's favourite newspaper, and it's widely read. And we, alone among, I guess, a lot of the media, do have a conservative viewpoint, but it's not slavishly pro-Trump. And I certainly don't intend to be that, and am not. But if you call out the dishonesty in the rest of the media, it's kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. It's just go out and report things the way they are, and then I give my opinion. And from what I can tell, the sort of mainstream media are doing, or mainstream media, the rest of the media, the sort of liberal media, is doing exactly what they did before 2016. They're reporting the world as they wish it was, not as it really is. And therefore they missed the biggest story, which was that Trump was winning. And that also drives a change in the polling behaviour, because there's that shy Trump voter. It's so repellent to be a Trump supporter, especially in places like New York, that people just pretend they're not, or they keep their mouths shut. We hear about women who've been unfriended on Facebook because they've expressed mild support for Donald Trump. So what that does is it blunts the radar of the left, of the Democrats. They're not really seeing the electoral landscape as it is, and therefore they're going half blind into this very crucial election campaign.
Spot on. Great work, Miranda. Thanks for joining us. Best of luck for the rest of a long campaign year.
Pleasure, Chris. Nice to talk to you.